Now let's get into some advanced configuration for this stream. So we've set up everything properly in terms of the simple route, but what if we wanted to add something like pagination? So I'm going to go ahead and go down here into the pagination section, click that. And with the Stripe API, we are actually going to be using some cursor pagination. Now this is where things can get a little crazy. You also get to see how customizable we can make these streams kind of within the UI itself with no code. So I've already chosen the strategy being cursor pagination, or the next page cursor we're going to use is going to be custom here. Now, this is where we can add something in called variables or macros. So as we mentioned before, the connector builder UI is all built on top of the low code YAML format. So that's exactly what we're going to do, is we're going to be referencing some of the macros that we have available to us. Now, if we look at the custom call that we had in the customer section, we had, let me go ahead and undo pagination really quick so I can pull that up. But you see that we had a couple things here. So obviously we're getting the full list of customers, but we also have this has more property that we can utilize for our cursor. But on the Stripe API docs, we also have what's called the ending before and starting after cursor, so that we're able to kind of see where we are in our position on the page. So what we're going to do here is going to go back and add pagination. We're going to obviously select cursor pagination. Going to go back to custom. Our cursor value here is where we can kind of access the data. So I'm going to do double curly brackets. Within that, I'm going to do response to access the response we get back, and go into data. And then we're going to go into the actual object for data here by going to the one spot in the array. And then I'm going to select the ID key here, because we're going to be using the ID of the last object inside the array to kind of show our position here, and then keep moving forward from there. Now in the stop condition, as I mentioned before, we have a has more flag here. So I'm going to say response.data.has_more is false. So if this is false in the response object, then we're going to stop because we've reached the end of the page. Now, in this section here, we're going to be injecting a query parameter, and the query parameter, as we saw in the docs, is going to be starting_after. So that's going to be the parameter that we use in order to inject the actual cursor value, which we're going to get here. And now we're going to limit the page size. So, we don't have a huge list, but we're going to limit this to 2. And the query parameter we're going to inject this into is going to be limit. So you can see now, if we go through review of this section, we have a cursor value here that we're pulling from the response. And the actual value we're pulling here is, let's say we're going to be pulling 2. So the ID of William Johnson here is going to be the value we're pulling. Now our stop condition we've set to is this has more flag that the API gives us, which is has more. If that's false, then we stop. If it's true, we know there's still more data we can access. Now the actual parameter we're going to take this value and inject it into is going to be the starting after. So it's going to be starting after equals the ID of William Johnson. We also set a limit value, which is going to be 2, and we're going to inject the value of 2 into the limit parameter, which we're going to see here in a second. So if I go ahead and click test, going to run through that. And at the bottom hand here of the screen, you can see that we have a couple pages because we've actually paginated through, and we can see all the requests here. If we go through the actual request, we can see that there's a limit of 2, and here's our response. So we only have 2 here. Now, if we click to the next page, we can see that Patricia Miller and William Davis is all here. And in the actual request for that one, you can see starting after, and we've taken out the actual ID from the previous response. If we click over again, it's the previous ID from that one. Keep going, it changes. So now you can see how customizable this endpoint can now be with the use of macros and actually tapping into the response. So that's pagination for you. But what if we wanted to get a little crazier and actually make the endpoint a little bit more customizable, in the sense that you can actually input or have your users input some sort of value to customize this call here? That's what we're going to do next.